Let's slide into this topic, relations between Ukraine and Africa. On his second Africa tour, Ukraine's Foreign Minister Dmytro Kuleba visited Morocco, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Mozambique and Nigeria. Ukraine's diplomatic push for Africa is part of a larger strategy called New Horizons, aimed at expanding opportunities for the Ukrainian state, business and citizens in Latin America, African and Asian countries. Africa matters for Ukraine, as the tour has clearly demonstrated. It was also a historic occasion because a Ukrainian foreign minister visited almost all of the African nations for the first time in history. So my question is, what are these tour's goals for Ukraine? If you can answer that.
To put it shortly, we need voices of Africa in the United Nations and globally to politically support Ukraine's fighting against Russia. We also need to diversify our foreign policy, as I have already mentioned. It's not the best moment for doing that, but still there is a goal of doing that. We have to outreach to those countries which have been the countries of the global south, the countries which are today very sensitive to the Russian rhetoric, to the paradigm within which there is a fight for the future of the international order, and they feel that they have to choose their sides. And to a certain extent, historically, there are all reasons for them to think that they should be joining countries like China or Russia in their fight against the West. And we have to change that approach and to change that attitude. And that's because of that, I think it is important politically to pay special attention to the countries of Africa.
Yeah, we should use the momentum. Is that right?
Absolutely. This is we as a victim of unprovoked and very unfair war probably would be the best voice to deliver this message to the African nations.
Absolutely agree to this. Ukraine has assisted in preserving peace in Africa. Over 300 Ukrainian blue helmets participated in 4 UN-backed missions in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, South Sudan, the Abyei region and Mali. Ukraine is currently working hard to expand its diplomatic presence on the continent. It is another war, another battle, just the political one, a battle for political influence in Africa. In our opinion, what is the importance of such a tour in terms of international politics? After all, it is obvious that we need Africa, but the very short-term goals of this visit, what could they be for Ukraine?
I think that the short-term goals are to try to capitalize or convert the grain deal, which is constantly under some kind of threat, and it is more or less operational, but it is under question, to convert it into strengthening of political positions of Ukraine in Africa, while still many African countries need Ukrainian grain. And they have been experiencing the problems in 2022. Some of them have been importing quite a huge amount of huge share of grain from Ukraine and Russia, and the war has disrupted those supplies, and that created huge economic problems inside African countries, in particular by increasing the prices for food in these poor countries. So they need us. They together, both they and us, need the grain deal to be operational. And this is a momentum for us to capitalize on that mutual interest. There is no guarantee that they will continue to depend on supplies from grain from Ukraine in the future. So as long as there is such a dependence, we should use it.
Let's slide into another topic. Peace Summit in Copenhagen. Preparations are underway. To be clear, no other country in the world wants peace as much as Ukraine does. We just need a real peace, not a counterfeit. A just and lasting peace, not a temporary respite before a new escalation. Recently, a high-ranking diplomat of the Swedish EU presidency said that the ministers of foreign affairs of the member states of the European Union discuss the upcoming summit dedicated to the promotion of Zelensky's peace formula. The summit is scheduled for mid-July and will be held in Copenhagen, reacting to the remark of journalists that a NATO summit is also scheduled for mid-July, which will be held on July 11 and 12 in Vilnius. The diplomat specified find that there is an intention to hold the Zelensky's peace formula summit before the summit of the North Atlantic Alliance Organization. What are you, as an expert in international politics, expect from this summit? From both of the summits, if you can answer that.
They obviously will be interconnected, and I'm afraid that the peace summit will be kind of a substitution for the NATO summit. I think that it is very unlikely that Ukraine gets what it wants from the NATO summit, and because of that, the kind of compensation could be the decisions or just the fact of the peace summit being held. That will be a broad platform to bring about not only Western countries to expand the platform, to expand the coalition, and to try to look for any workable agreements or solutions. It's very good that they will be based on Zelensky's peace formula. However, I don't think that a compromise will be reached on either of these summits, but they both will demonstrate growing support for Ukraine. I think that in that regard, they both will be important. And in what concerns this particular peace summit, it is very important to understand what other countries beyond the Western world think about this war, how they perceive it, what interests of them are at stake, and how much they are ready to invest into bringing it to an end.
Great. Well, then, what would you say, the peace summit in Copenhagen or the NATO summit in Vilnius? They are overlapping and interconnected. One is maybe like a cherry on the top to make Ukraine closer to NATO. But which one of these two summits are more important?
I think that the NATO summit is more important because I expect the peace summit to be more or less a broad talk about everything without any formal solutions and without any obligatory actions. But NATO summit is going to show the possibilities of real security guarantees to Ukraine, whether it is possible to get them. And this is the key question for breaking the war to the end. Without effective security guarantees for Ukraine, there can be no sustainable peace. And if NATO is not ready to invite Ukraine and to provide it with a membership, which has, I'm sure this is the case, what kind of substitution would NATO offer? What kind of format within which Ukraine would feel much more secure than just being a partner of NATO? That would be a critical question.